The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional for any health concerns. Take care of yourself out there.
Welcome to Unravelling. This is a podcast that sees the world through the lens of mental health. I'm Mary Wilson, a journalist.
And I'm Kurt White, a social worker and psychotherapist. And it's July, if you're listening to this when it first comes out. It's a Disability Pride Month, which is celebrated in this country in July because of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, a pivotal piece of legislation that helped to increase access for persons with disabilities. Is this something you've ever had much experience with, Mary, or thought much about?
Yeah, I really haven't had to think about it a lot. Back in my news anchor days, they were asking some, local quote-unquote celebrities to participate in an adaptive sports game of basketball. And so I was in the wheelchair with the rest of the group trying to play basketball. And I do remember that feeling of at the end of the game saying, oh, I can't wait to stand up and, sort of stretch my legs because this was really hard work. And realizing that, of course, the other people on the team weren't able to do that.
Yes, it's very interesting. It's a thing that I'm sometimes fascinated how little we talk about it in society, actually, right? Even though it's something that, sometimes even say, like, people are only temporarily not disabled or able, right? You could turn it on its head and say, disability is a thing that people move in and out of at different times. You might break your leg and you might use crutches for a time or even a wheelchair. Or as you age, you might have different kinds of problems or develop a disabling kind of condition, or all kinds of different things. And they can be visible and invisible.
Yeah, and Kurt, in the time that I've known you, I've seen you with a cane at times and seen you battling certain disabilities of your own.
Yeah, I definitely have identified more and more in my adult life as a person who lives with a disability. A couple of different distinct things, an autoimmune problem that causes inflammation in my joints and which can be painful, which I sort of adapt to in different ways and have special treatment for and things like that, as well as a problem in my spine that is, always with me these days after multiple surgeries, sometimes worse than others, sometimes visible, sometimes invisible. I'm coming back from having another surgery on my spine. I recorded this episode interview right before that surgery. So, it's sort of like a big piece of my life more and more and more. And I think it's sort of interesting for us to think about the connection and relationship between disability and the society that we live in and mental health and what that even means anyway, right? How do all these things relate and fit together?
Yeah. So today our episode is really about how mental health and disability overlap, intertwine, and how society and structures just aren't built for everyone.
And I've been interested in this sort of idea that's out there. Some people have written a lot about it, although many people don't know anything about it, of disability justice and what that means. What does it mean to think about these kinds of issues in completely different ways, to sort of turn them on their head? And how can the lens that we get into with disability justice maybe inform the way that we look at the world, whether we are having a personal experience of disability or not? And what is disability anyway, right? I mean, that kind of thing.
And both of us traveled to the studio in Amherst to talk to two really special guests, Cat Milo and Dr. Madeline Peters, who were able to share their perspectives on all of this.
Yes, I really wanted to find the right guests for this, and I was glad to have a pairing. We did this interview a little bit differently, so it's both of us talking to both of them and just kind of having a conversation. We had a long conversation. We covered a lot of ground. It was really very interesting and stimulating, and I learned a lot. And I was just so glad to be a part of it. And Cat Milo is a clinical social worker whom I actually know from Smith College School for Social Work. And Cat Milo's mentor is Dr. Madeline Peters, who has a long and distinguished multiple-decade career as an expert on disability, a disability advocate, was the Disability Services Coordinator, Director at UMass Amherst in Massachusetts, and has worked in multiple places in higher education, has written academic articles and chapters in books, which we'll link to, about these topics. And we talked with both of them.
Yeah, we hope you enjoy this conversation.
My name is Cat Milo, or just Milo, and I use they, them pronouns, and I'm excited to be here.
I'm Madeline Peters. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm happy to be here too.
And those voices you're hearing are our guests today on Unravelling, where we have a special episode with a different format. I'm here also with Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hello.
Yay!
Nice to see you outside of the intro.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're all here in person, and we're going to have a great conversation about disability. So let's dive right in. And there's that word disability. It comes up in so many different contexts, and the meaning sort of depends on who's using it. Some disabilities may be able to be visible, many are not visible. So what does disability mean to you both?
Well, we were kind of struggling with how to define disability we're working on the intro of a chapter of a book together. And my opinion was to take it from a historical perspective, because we were basically getting stuck in the fact that at different points in time, disability has meant different things. And you like to quote the ADA for this one.
I do. So according to Americans with Disabilities Act, there's a three-pronged definition. Number one, you must have a record of the disability. You can be identified as a person with a disability. And then you have to have major life activity that is significantly impaired, quote unquote. So, the ADA, like the colleges, like everybody that has to accommodate people, want to know, well, can you walk 20 feet? Can you, how far can you see? Can you hear? And to me, a disability really is when you're affected by a major life activity, and people know seeing, hearing, breathing, thinking, learning, sitting, standing. I know the list goes on. Mental health disabilities, learning disabilities, that it's not what the average person would do. And that's what they base it on. So everyone nowadays is trying to get on an airplane. And so they're making the chairs smaller and smaller. So all of a sudden, people that weren't disabled, quote unquote, are now having trouble. Well, if you have long legs, you have to get first class. If you're a little bit larger than the seats, well, you need to go in first class, not the economy. So it's like our society creates the disabilities that many people have. It's how we construct things, to me, is what makes it inaccessible, which causes us to bear the brunt of being disabled. We create disability.
Yeah, which then is the social model of accessibility, is the idea that society and the things that it creates is what disables people, as opposed to whatever is inherent to our bodies and space.
Because a barrier exists. A barrier exists.
Yes.
If we didn't have that barrier, there would be no
no need for accommodating.
No need for accommodating.
Yeah. And then, sometimes I get tangled up in knots also about well, if we're following the ADA, you need to have your major life functions impaired. But then what about when your accommodations are being met? Then do you no longer qualify as someone with a disability because all your needs are being met, appropriately? There's the identity of being disabled and what that means to you as an individual. And then there's what you need to say and do in order to get your needs met.
And the population of people who are disabled, it's so diverse, and it just runs the gamut. And any one of us could be part of that group at any time, which makes it sort of a unique group that's being oppressed, right?
Right. Well, that's the story I used to tell in my workshops was, the football player who gets in a car accident becomes a, paraplegic and it's just kill me, I don't want to live. And it's like, well, you haven't even experienced this yet, but that's how terrible this is, the loss of my legs,
Certainly on a societal level.
Yeah.
Oftentimes disability is associated with a limitation or an ending of a piece of your life or a part of your life. And oftentimes, I'm going to say mostly I find it with able-bodied folks, but maybe some disabled folks feel this way too, but have trouble with the word disabled because...
Right, broken down.
Yeah, they hear
Your car's disabled.
as that. But right now, that's the word we have as a community to best encompass disability. And we just have to know as a community, we're talking about society is disabling us. That's what's happening here. It is not our fault.
When you might imagine that in disability, unlike other sorts of social justice work, that a person might naturally be able to find a little bit more empathy, because you might say, I don't want to accommodate the person in a wheelchair, but it could be at some point I need to use a wheelchair. And so, it's not off the table at all, right? I can't, if you say, well, I don't know, this person has this other difference, but I'll never be in that group. No,
well, I think that's what it is, though. Yeah. It's that idea that I will never be like this. Okay.
Or if I was, I would be more self-resilient or self.
Yeah. I think that's a sort of fear of the sort of breakdown of the body or the mind or stuff like that. It's sort of like we're defended against the idea of that kind of vulnerability, taps an existential anxiety.
Yeah, and yet there's car accidents, all kinds of accidents, getting lost hiking.
And I know many, many, many people that didn't have a disability and then did have a disability.
Right. There's so many diseases out there nowadays that will leave you with a disability. Measles was the disease that caused deafness. And so there's a whole slew of people that came through the schools at one time, and it was from the measles epidemic back in the day.
Well, it seems also like there's a lot of folks that maybe have invisible disabilities or sometimes even physical disabilities that they don't want to identify in that way, or they don't naturally think to identify in that way, even when it might actually benefit them in very practical ways to start to identify in that way. And I just sort of like to, I don't know if I have a clear question about that, but shine a light on that seems to me an additional problem here.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started working at Hampshire, my role was specifically they hired me as an alumni fellow, so I was closer in age to the students. But I was explicitly meant to work with all students, not just students who were with the Office of Accessibility, and support spreading tools for executive function and basically opening the door to accommodations. And oftentimes I would work with students who, when we started working together, wouldn't have considered themselves neurodivergent. But when I'd let them know, it seems like you are often having a really hard time keeping up with your work. Do you think that something like flexible accommodations would help you with this?
Well, and I think too, people don't want to be treated differently. And the minute you say, I have a disability, you
can't unring that bell, right?
You can't,
How do you guys see the mental health disabilities or the sort of whole category of kind of invisible disabilities as being different from the visible or maybe more obvious physical kinds of disabilities?
Well, first of all, you can't see them.
That's true.
So
we got one difference.
There we go.
So it's like people assume that you're able-bodied, and I said, well, if I could come in here with my head in a wheelchair, then you would recognize, that I'm a little bit different than the rest of you, So it's taken me a lifetime to come up with the coping mechanisms I have now. I feel I do pretty good for myself now, but if I backed up, 20 years, or 30 years ago, I was a hot mess. Different things, I've honed them and I've filed them and I've molded them so that, I can live my life without, running up and down the stairs 20 times, although I do still forget stuff, but I think that people make assumptions about you too. So I have my doctorate, and like I struggle with spelling. You know, my partner teases me because I always put beagles instead of bagels on the grocery list.
Yeah.
You know, or broccoli. I have a hard time spelling broccoli. You know, and it's like, but yeah, that doesn't mean I'm, you know, less educated than most people, but it's just that it doesn't go away, you know, and it's always there. It's there in conversations. I think it's constant coping all the time.
Obviously, also, people with visible disabilities also are like constantly coping, but there is something about like invisible disabilities, which usually does, include neurodivergence or mental illness, or learning disabilities. But I mean, I was just now, of course, as a queer and trans person, thinking about it in relationship to being in the closet, and like a lot of the times, like with my neurodivergences, I can mask them a lot of the time, and it's a lot of extra work, but I can do it. And there's this whole conversation now happening with like what is becoming like a blooming amount of autism diagnosis and research that's happening. There's more and more conversation about masking in terms of like acting quote unquote normal and like not doing quote unquote weird things.
And weird things by control yourself, control yourself.
Yes.
That's the piece.
Yes.
You know, can you control yourself so people don't know? Mm-hmm. You know, so maybe you want to have an outburst, but you're controlling yourself. Mm-hmm. But then by the end of the day, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
That has to take a toll.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically being told that you're wrong and what you want or need is not valid.
Well, I think you're tired. Because I think you're over processing everything, you know, physical toll. I think when I first started working, people had learning disabilities. That was their diagnosis. When I got to Hampshire, a long time had passed. It was learning disabilities, anxiety, depression. It's like everyone had comorbid disabilities because it was the anxiety and depression
that comes from
living in society. You know, anxiety that someone's going to call you out and say you did something wrong, or, you know, PTSD, you had bad experiences with people, depression, because it's hard to deal with society.
Shame and embarrassment.
Yeah.
Now, I sort of wonder about how much of it, like at the root of it in a way, is a kind of a wish to include, or a failure of imagination in a way. Like I can remember you might remember this, the old episode of Mr. Rogers, where he got a lot of credit for this because he brought on a young boy in a wheelchair. And it was a very moving episode in its own way. But if you look at how did he bring the person on in a wheelchair, he went outside the house and the set, right? Because there were a couple of steps. And he went outside the house and he met him like outside. And I was so disappointed in that, because I thought, here's a whole show about imagination. They imagine a whole world, and they sing about it, and they do all these things, and they can't imagine that their people could build them a ramp. You know, like you want to do an episode on disability. No one's forcing you to. Build a ramp. Get them in the house. Get them in the house. But he couldn't think to get him in the house. And I just sort of thought, like, what is that? Why is it so hard to imagine? Is it a sort of a wish at some level not to sort of be fully inclusive, or is it, what is it?
Well, I think it's because people don't want to spend the money. Because we imagine, okay, so go to the grocery store. I remember I took one of my blind students to the grocery store because I said, well, what kinds of deodorants are there? And I was like, what do you mean? There's thousands of deodorants, you know? And I was like, a football field of deodorants. Okay? So it's not that we can't imagine it. It's that we don't want to. You know, we're not gearing ourselves towards that. And that's what bothers me the most. Imagine having one car, all red cars, and they're Volkswagen Beetles, and they're out in the parking lot. Well, they made all these different color cars and different sizes to meet people's needs. Oh, but we can't make one for people with disabilities because that would cost too much money.
Yeah, I think oftentimes it's like a rigidity that we get into as individuals and on systemic level. I mean, and part of it is like, as humans, we need to create systems and routines to do the amount of things that we are trying to do and expect ourselves to do every single day. And so then when you throw a person into your classroom and their needs don't meet the way that you've been running your classroom for 20 years, like that person's acting as a wrench to your system. And so, like, of course, like, I feel like it's almost an animal response to be like frustrated at this person that is making your well-working, air quotes, system work. Like, they are now creating, that's how disabled people wind up being seen as the problem, and the disability, therefore, as being seen as the problem, is because they're breaking the theoretically perfect system that was happening well before it. I got sort of excited when you asked about the imagination piece because I'm a sci-fi fan, and I think there's a lot of overlap with disability and disability justice and sci-fi, and just something about, like, I think of disabled folks and neurodivergent folks as some of the most creative thinkers out there, because we're finding the ways to make these things work and come up with like what would seem like wild solutions to things. Just on a daily basis, because we need to figure out, it's like, that's the cognitive flexibility, like needing to be able to find ways to make things work.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember one of the chancellors said to me, "We have people on campus with schizophrenia." And I was like, yeah.
Girl. What?
They're in the computer engineers, your engineering, electronic engineering. They're brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying everybody with schizophrenia is brilliant, but that's where they
I know
were.
Some people, beautiful, brilliant, creative writers.
Yeah, autism. They're your computer science. And it's like, well, I said, you're thinking about the schizophrenic person that grabs you in the bush and, kills you. That's where his mind was going.
Yeah,
we need more security,
full of stigma,
and I was like, but this is what we do. And rightfully so. What have we been taught?
What would a better world look like here? Because, I mean, a lot of your work is really rooted in the reality of things as they are, which is a really very painful reality. It's a lot of people not making room. And now we can notice progress and we can notice other things. But at the same time, like, well, what you have is a need. What good is progress, in a way? What you want is the need to be met. Well, and I'm just sort of curious about that.
More communes.
I mean, neighborhoods,
communes. Communes, neighborhoods, or, I'm working with my tribe, and, that's what we're working on, is more connection for the people of the tribe, so we can depend on one another, because there's so many people with so many different skills, and it's like you go out, you don't know who you're getting to do different things for you, and I think that it's really, to me, the whole thing about people with disabilities is that people have to have sensitivity towards one another. That's all it is.
You gotta care.
It's like, I'm nobody special, but it's like I care about people, and I look at you and I go, looks like she's having a hard time telling me this sentence. I wonder if she has a learning disability. Or it seems like they're struggling to do something. Like, more sensitivity. It's just being sensitive.
What I see as like steps towards a better world is more, I think of them as like webs of care and connection. And like, I think it's easier when it's like physically local, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But like connecting with people and committing to them, and being really clear about like what needs are present in the community. And I think we are too chaotic to just sort of like hope for the best in terms of like sticking community together and saying like, oh, we'll just like magically meet each other's needs. Like, unfortunately, we're pretty chaotic creatures, and so systems are very helpful, but then of course systems get problematic. And so then, okay, on a practical level, I feel like making a neighborhood /care web and then having weekly or monthly meetings that at which people talk about like what's working, what's not working, what problems are coming up. And I think that can happen in like pods, building structures that are rooted in small communities, leaning more into how good it is for us to like help one another, like emotionally and spiritually and socially. Like we are social creatures. And so like if we can build systems that reward us and support us in supporting each other, that's, I think, how we get to like more functional societies.
Yeah, it's just a matter of caring. To me, it's like changing your attitude. Mm-hmm. It's like care about people, because I feel that, I got put in this, I took the position as working with people with disabilities, but it makes you ask questions, like, what do you need? What do you think you need? How can I help you? And then people will tell you. And some people don't know. A lot of the students didn't know what they needed, but I had been in the field long enough that I could suggest things. Some things work and some things don't. I remember I went to shake a person's hand and they were amputee. And I put my hand out to shake, and then I looked at the floor immediately because I thought something fell because it was a stub, so I was like, so hi, and I was looking down and I was like, okay, let's do that again. And I grabbed the person's arm and shook their arm and said, nice to meet you. And I'm looking them in the eye. But people are afraid to do that. Now it's like, I'm embarrassed. Oh my God, what did I do? Or they don't say anything. Yeah. And it's like we're afraid to admit our own fault, around other people.
We're gonna mess up is part of the disability work, is we're going to
You're
hurt
gonna
each
make
other.
Mistakes. But it's better to say, I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm sorry, can you
than
help me
to act
understand?
like you know what somebody's saying.
I just want to comment on the community part of things. What would it look like? And I was thinking, here I am now. I honest to God, have probably have like 4 or 5 different qualifying disabilities. So, but I don't always identify that way. But I think more and more and more, it's become like a part of both my identity and something I talk about and something that's sort of important to me as a person to talk more about and to invite practices that push against in small and large ways. But right now, as you know, because you can see it, I've got a cane. I don't always have a cane, but sometimes I have a cane. The moment I got this cane, and I thought, as long as you got a cane, let's get a cane with a little bit of style. So for a while I had one with flowers on it, and now I got this one that's purple. I call it Prince, purple cane. Terrible pun. I got it. But the moment I started walking around with the cane, I don't know how many people that I now know their cane stories about it, and they say, like the cafeteria where I work, somebody says, oh, why does everyone around here have a better cane than me? And then pulls out his, and it's actually quite electric blue. It was very nice. And then starts telling me about all this, like I didn't used to bring it, actually, because even though I can benefit, people know I can walk, I can get by without it, but like people thought I was faking maybe if I did it. And I said, but now I think like it helps, and it helps you. I got a cane, I can see each other. And then I'm at the grocery store, and then this young person, I wouldn't have maybe guessed that they had a cane, and they got stickers all over the cane, and telling me all about the stickers and the this and that, and these people, they get to stay in my heart now in a particular way. Like we've got a little invisible community of people with canes. And I've got to say, like, it is easier for me to carry it, knowing there are other people carrying it, And I think that was the implicit ask. Like, we don't have to live together necessarily, but like we can know that we exist. We're in the cane club here, whether we know it or not. And I wasn't expecting that from that, but it's really kind of wonderful, if I end up not needing the cane in the future, I'll kind of miss it, actually. I think I really would, and but it would make it easier to pick it up again if I probably that's how it'll go. I'll need it intermittently over the course of my life, but I just want to sort of share that too.
Thanks for sharing it. Yeah.
Those limitations that get put on disabled people. What instead would you like our disabled listeners to hear?
Oh, I mean, I think it's amazing in our current reality how much technology and how many tools are available to help with all kinds of disabilities and neurodivergences. Like, I'm optimistic about the idea that there actually are accommodations that could be made for everything. It's just about finding the people who can help you access those things. So I have a cardiac condition and an implanted defibrillator because of it. And that's a whole wazoo. I'm definitely on the way younger side because I'm 28 right now, and I got it at 20. And when I got it in, I already knew I was trans, and I had been considering top surgery, and I was pretty clearly told that was not going to be a possibility because of my cardiac condition. And then eventually, I got a cardiac team that actually really took more of an approach of, we want to be expanding your life instead of restricting your life. We want to try and find, dude, you're out of shape because we told you not to do anything. So now let's find what can you do. And so they gave me more and more freedom to be able to sort of push the limits of, oftentimes, there is this threat of something bad might happen if you push yourself too hard. And unfortunately, sometimes that is very legitimate. And does that mean you should not push yourself? And so I think the piece I was going to get to is eventually I decided I did want to have top surgery. And so I had to go through calling multiple surgeons, and basically trying to find someone, and I eventually did find someone who was willing to go there with me. And basically the fear had been from the surgeons who turned me down was basically I've never worked with someone with a cardiac disease. I've done surgeries on people with pacemakers, but never in the chest area. I've done plenty of top surgeries, but that just seems like a step too far. And I did wind up being the first patient that my surgeon, he had done plenty of top surgeries and he'd done plenty of surgeries for people with pacemakers, but he had never done the combination. And because it's the same territory, people were freaked out about going there. But he was basically if you're going to go there with me, I will go there with you. Let's figure this out. But I'm telling you, it was even to the point where when I was pre-op, he was looking at my chest and he was like, okay, so I just need you to know, if anything goes wrong, we're going to start on your left side where the pacemaker is. And if anything goes wrong, I'm just going to close you up and we'll take it from there. But there is a chance that you might wake up with only half of your chest missing. And so then when I did wake up with I was okay, great. I'm really glad you're going to go here with me. But also, oh my God, imagine if I wake up with one breast left. That's not what I want personally at all. So then I was absolutely elated when I woke up and my whole chest had been flattened. And then it wound up being fine. Nothing, it went so smoothly. I had no cardiac events during the surgery. This thing that doctors had been telling me for years wasn't going to be possible and I needed to let go of it. It was just about finding the right team and finding the right tools and helping my body get to a place where it could handle it. But I think what I want disabled listeners to know is a lot more is possible than what they say is, and surround yourself with more disabled people who are trying to think of expansive futures, because I think they're possible. Yeah.
It's beautiful. You bring tears to my eyes. No, it's very beautiful.
Yay.
Yeah. Genuinely. Yeah. Thank you for that. Expansion is a wonderful concept too, isn't it? Maybe that is sort of the replacement for disability in a way, right?
Yes. Well, it's for disabled listeners, there's nothing wrong with you. And stop letting people tell you there is something wrong with you. And sometimes it does take us to accept who we are because our society hasn't given us, put us on a pedestal and told us that we're great. But we are, because we think differently, we do differently, and the struggle is real, but that struggle makes us stronger. And I can't stand when people say, trying to climb those stairs makes you stronger. But it's like not trying to climb them, trying to figure out how to get to where you want to go in a different way. And finding those different paths can take you in many different directions.
Madeline and Cat Milo, thank you so much for being here and for this great discussion.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
It's been really wonderful. Thank you again to Cat Milo and to Madeline for a really wonderful interview. Here with me again is Mary. What do you think, Mary?
Oh, it was just a really great opportunity to see the world through, different perspectives. And something that stuck with me to this day is that these accommodations, they don't just benefit the person who maybe needs them, but they benefit the rest of us too. So it's sort of like, why aren't spaces built for everyone, and not just physical spaces too, but policies and that sort of thing?
That's right. It's one of the things that is most powerful in these ideas to me too, is this idea that maybe disability doesn't really exist in the way that people think that it does, right? It's an intersection of society and the individual, right? If you there could be an underlying label for something, but, what does it mean that we call it this, and what is the expectation associated with it, right? If everything is accessible, how is the disability disabling? It's just a difference, right? It's just a difference. And I think sometimes that can be internalized in ways that are hard. When I think about this sort of question for myself of like, I've been a person with some intermittent disability and some chronic disability, some of which I haven't mentioned, but things that are painful. Like I don't want the pain part of it, right? But sometimes the sort of the shame part of it is sort of tricky too. Like I'd like to be able to move around quickly rather than slowly. I'd like to not have other people sort of notice and maybe judge or something like that, right? And so sort of like it was a hard thing for me to sort of take on the idea of disability. But I think it's come to mean something different to me, I think. It's come to mean something more about an understanding of the limitations of the body sometimes, and ways that actually kind of opens up a certain awareness of the fragility of things and of the gratitude I have for other people who have helped to lay down spaces for me that have been good landing places, I think.
So sort of a shift in mindset almost from disability being that you're broken or there's something wrong with you, but really maybe an invitation to take up space and sort of demand certain rights.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, neither one of us is going to win the 100-meter dash, right? I mean, it's just not in the cards for either one of us. But that's not a disability, is it, right? It's just a reality, right? And so who cares how fast I get to my car, right? If I can do it quickly, I'll do it quickly. But if I can't do it quickly, so the hell what? Right? And why shouldn't the world make room for that? Why shouldn't the world make room for people who think differently or have different relationships, like in different kinds of neurodiversity or different kinds of attentional patterns or things like this? Why do we label them at all, actually, right? Instead of sort of recognizing them as part of the spectrum of human experience.
Oh, just great things to ponder.
Yeah.
I really appreciated this interview.
I do too. I feel really excited by it, energized, and I think sort of ready to dig into this topic more. And we'll definitely leave some resources in the show notes. I really hope people will check them out. Some wonderful things, articles, books, and things like that, as well as resources for folks who might be interested in exploring this more.
And we'll see you next time.
Unravelling is brought to you by Brattleboro Retreat. Our producers at Charts and Leisure are Andrew Atkin, Hans Butow, and Jason Oberholzer.
And you can find us on social media by searching Brattleboro Retreat. Brattleboro Retreat is committed to exploring diverse perspectives on mental health. While we invite hosts and guests to share their insights, the views expressed are their own and do not necessarily reflect the policies or positions of the hospital or its staff.